Michael Price's avatar. He's currently helping clients manage their GSA and VA contracts, and he reads every comment.
Today is June 21st, and I'm Nancy, your co-host.
Welcome. I'm Michael Price, your host.
You know, there is this undeniable psychological weight to just a simple little sticker.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, think about the last time you picked up a product. You turned it over and you saw a label guaranteeing its origin. It acts as a shortcut for our brains.
Right. You don't even question it.
Exactly. We see the label, we just trust the system that placed it there, and we make our purchasing decision based on that assumed truth.
Yeah, it's a built-in trust mechanism.
But what happens when you peel back that comforting sticker and realize the reality underneath is, well, a carefully constructed fiction? Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are looking at a targeted federal purge that just happened on the government's own version of Amazon.
Which is a fascinating situation.
It really is, and this is a story first broken by Small Business Trends in a highly relevant article published today, June 21st, 2026, by Sarah Lewis.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal piece of reporting. It takes something that, sounds structurally dry on paper, like federal procurement rules, and exposes the actual mechanics of how it directly reshapes the landscape for everyday workers and entrepreneurs.
Because it affects real people.
Exactly. We rely so heavily on these labels to make informed choices, right? Because we can't personally audit a factory floor. So when that system is manipulated, the economic distortion is just profound.
So our mission today is to unpack the real-world ripple effects of this government crackdown on foreign goods that are fraudulently labeled as made in America. We want to discover exactly how this alters the survival tactics for small business owners and domestic manufacturers.
And to really grasp the scale of this, we have to talk about a platform called GSA Advantage.
Right. For those of you listening who might not interact with federal contracts on a daily basis, you can kind of think of GSA Advantage as the central digital marketplace for federal buyers.
Yeah, if an agency needs, say, office supplies or construction materials for a new facility or specialized tools, they'd not just browse the open internet. They log on to this massive controlled ecosystem.
Managed by the General Services Administration.
Exactly. It's designed to streamline purchasing while ensuring compliance with federal sourcing laws.
And Sarah Lewis's article details how the Small Business Administration, the SBA, working alongside the GSA, has just purged nearly 24 foreign products from this specific platform.
Because they were caught using fake domestic labeling.
Right, masquerading as American-made goods to secure government contracts. But before we look at the actual mechanism of how a company pulls off that kind of fraud, we need to set the stage with a mandatory impartiality statement to really understand the origin of this policy.
Because context is crucial here. This policy shift does not just happen in a vacuum. It is a deliberate administrative mover.
Yeah. This specific crackdown stems directly from a directive issued by President Trump at the recent White House Small Business Summit, and the article features a direct quote from SBA Administrator Kelly Loeffler,
who stated that, as part of their commitment to rebuilding American industry, every taxpayer dollar spent by the federal government should go to support American businesses, workers, and products.
Now, I want to explicitly pause right here to clarify something for you, our listener. In this deep dive, we are strictly reporting the ideas, the quotes, and the facts presented in the source material.
Right, just laying out the information.
Exactly. We are not taking any political sides, and we are not endorsing the viewpoints of any administration. Our goal is strictly to break down the mechanics of the policy and its economic impact, as outlined in the article.
And looking purely at those mechanics, the underlying issue is this calculated exploitation of domestic labeling laws. Foreign companies are actively misrepresenting their supply chains to capture federal contracts.
Contracts legally reserved for genuine American businesses under the Buy American Act. Okay, let's unpack this because when I first read the article, I got stuck on a specific number. The SBA and GSA removed nearly 24 products.
Yeah, 20-something items.
Right, and in the context of a platform that acts as the primary marketplace for the federal government, a platform hosting literally hundreds of thousands of items, removing 24 products sounds statistically irrelevant.
It sounds like a drop in the bucket.
It does. So is this purely a symbolic press release, or are we looking at the beginning of a systemic overhaul?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the absolute number of products removed in this specific action isn't the metric you want to focus on.
Oh, really?
No. What matters is the precedent it sets for the overarching risk calculus. You have to look at the mechanism of the fraud itself. Often, these companies are exploiting what is essentially an assembly loophole.
What does that look like in practice?
So they will import 95% of a product's components from overseas. Then they screw in one final bolt in the U.S. warehouse and fraudulently claim the Made in America designation, and for a long time, the risk of getting caught doing that was perceived as incredibly low, while the financial reward of securing a federal contract was guaranteed revenue.
What exactly is the official definition of a product made in America?
According to a conversation with a branch manager at GSA Years Ag, and I quote, "If a product undergoes substantial transformation into a new product of commerce, it is considered made in America."
So they were essentially just playing the odds.
They were. But this action, driven by the SBA's new zero-tolerance policy towards waste and fraud, completely alters that math.
Because it signals that the federal government is actively auditing the GSA Advantage platform.
Exactly. If you are a foreign manufacturer using a fraudulent label, this public purge serves as a major warning. It says the government is actively looking at the subcomponents of your supply chain, not just the final assembly location.
Right, it changes the environment from passive trust to active verification.
It's a huge shift.
But a zero-tolerance policy in a Washington boardroom means nothing until you see the friction it creates on a factory floor. Let's look at the only company actually bearing the weight of this.
Because taking away contracts from bad actors only matters if it clears the path for genuine domestic producers.
Exactly. And the article introduces a fascinating case study, Cheryl Manufacturing.
They were the perfect illustration of why untangling the supply chain fraud matters to the broader economy.
According to the piece, Cheryl Manufacturing is the absolute only U.S. producer of stainless steel flatware that is 100% made in America.
Which is wild to think about.
Right. All the forks, knives, and spoons utilized in domestic households or, federal cafeterias, they are the only ones making them entirely within our borders.
And the article quotes their co-founder and CEO, Matthew Roberts, about this.
Yes, he talks about purchasing their facility in Sherrill, New York, back in 2005. He really emphasizes their commitment to continuing the tradition of American manufacturing and craftsmanship in that specific community.
Keeping a domestic manufacturing facility operational for over 2 decades requires navigating an intense economic reality. You are constantly competing against a global supply chain.
A supply chain that utilizes aggressive cost cutting.
Cheaper labor markets, heavily subsidized raw materials, all of it.
Here's where it gets really interesting because the baseline costs aren't even comparable. Imagine running a marathon where your competitor is secretly wearing rollerblades.
That's a great way to put it.
That's what it feels like for domestic companies competing against mislabeled, subsidized foreign goods. It's not just unfair. The buyer's baseline for what things should cost becomes totally warped.
Right.
Cheryl Manufacturing is doing the actual heavy lifting sourcing domestic steel, adhering to U.S. environmental regulations, paying fair wages in New York.
And then a competitor swoops in, imports ultra-cheap flatware, slaps a fake Made in America sticker on the box, and just underbids them for a federal contract.
Which is why understanding the mechanism of federal procurement is so critical here. Federal contracts are not just a temporary boost for these companies.
No, they are foundational revenue streams. When the government commits to buying domestic flatware for military bases or federal agencies, it provides a stable, predictable volume of orders. That predictability is what allows a company like Cheryl Manufacturing to plan out a fiscal year.
To invest in new stamping machinery.
Exactly, and to ensure they can meet payroll. This crackdown protects the American workers whose literal livelihoods depend on that predictable pipeline.
If Cheryl loses a government contract to a fraudulent competitor, the ripple effect is immediate. It's a direct line from a fake sticker on a procurement website to a worker losing their paycheck in upstate New York.
The removal of these misleading products acts as a defense mechanism for that domestic industrial base. It ensures that capital intended for American workers actually reaches them.
So, on paper, this looks like a flawless victory for domestic industry. We identify the loophole, we killed the bad actors off the platform, and American workers keep their jobs.
It sounds perfect.
But protecting companies through these audits introduces a new kind of friction. If you enforce a zero-tolerance policy, the burden of proof shifts entirely onto the business owner. And the article pivots to detail a very heavy compliance reality.
It is the inherent trade-off of strict enforcement. A zero-tolerance policy demands rigorous, verifiable compliance from everyone.
Every single vendor.
Yeah. The government cannot just take a company's word for it anymore. They need a documented paper trail proving the origin of every raw material and subcomponent.
Okay, let me push back on that on behalf of the listener, because this seems like a structural trap. Wait, so the good guys now have to drown in paperwork just to prove they aren't the bad guys?
That is the reality, yes.
If I run a modest manufacturing shop, I don't have a dedicated compliance department like a Fortune 500 company. The sheer administrative burden of proving where every single screw and sheet of metal comes from seems staggering. Doesn't this effectively punish the exact small businesses it's trying to protect?
This raises an important question, and it really is the central tension of the article. The burden of accountability is indeed heavy.
Super heavy.
But what makes it particularly intense is the shift in enforcement. The government is not just relying on the SBA to perform administrative paperwork checks anymore. The article highlights a significant escalation. The FBI is now actively involved in the auditing process.
Whoa, moving from an SBA administrative audit to an FBI investigation changes this from a slap on the wrist to potential federal prison time.
It fundamentally reclassifies the offense. The FBI's financial crimes section is actively seeking out false claims regarding these Made in America certifications.
Because they're treating it as fraud.
Right, they are treating it as a serious financial crime because it is, by definition, defrauding the American taxpayer. When you secure a federal contract under false pretenses, you are stealing public funds.
That makes sense.
Furthermore, the FBI has established systems where business owners are actively encouraged to report suspicious competitors via an anonymous tip line.
Oh, wow. So you essentially have your competitors acting as undercover informants.
Pretty much.
You have to have your supply chain documentation completely airtight, or you risk an investigation by the FBI's financial crimes section. That is a daunting reality for a small mom-and-pop manufacturer who might just make an honest ledger mistake regarding the origin of a minor component.
The psychological and financial pressure of that environment is just immense, and the government recognizes that if they apply this level of scrutiny without providing any structural relief, they risk accidentally crushing the small businesses they intend to uplift.
Because the cost of compliance could easily outpace the profit margins of the federal contracts themselves.
Exactly.
Which brings us to how the SBA is attempting to counterbalance that pressure. They realize they are wielding a very heavy stick with the FBI, so they have to introduce capital avenues to help small manufacturers absorb these new administrative costs.
And the article details 3 specific financial tools the SBA has introduced to empower small manufacturers and keep them viable in this heightened compliance landscape.
Let's break down the mechanics of these tools because they are substantial. First, there is a 90% loan guarantee for manufacturers. How does that actually change the math for a local bank looking at a small factory?
It completely rewrites the risk profile. Traditionally, banks hesitate to lend to small manufacturers because the overhead is high and the specialized equipment is difficult to liquidate if the business fails.
Right, what is a bank going to do with a giant custom metal press?
Exactly. But by guaranteeing 90% of the loan, the SBA is essentially telling the bank that the federal government assumes almost all the risk. It heavily incentivizes local banks to inject capital into domestic factories.
That makes the capital so much more accessible. The second tool is a total waiver of loan fees for specific manufacturing NAICS codes in fiscal year 2026.
Which is huge.
And for anyone listening who is unfamiliar with the bureaucracy, a NAICS code is essentially just the government's classification system that identifies your primary business activity.
It proves you are a true manufacturer rather than just a reseller.
Right, so waiving those fees for FY 2026, what does that do?
It's a direct retention of cash flow for the business. When you take out a commercial loan, the origination fees can be significant. By eliminating them for these specific manufacturing codes, the SBA lowers the barrier to entry.
So they keep more money in their pocket right off the bat.
Yes, and that retained capital can then be deployed to handle the new regulatory environment, perhaps by purchasing specialized supply chain tracking software or even hiring a dedicated compliance officer.
And the third tool is a unique loan program designed exclusively for American manufacturers. So what does this all mean?
It's a comprehensive approach.
If you are an entrepreneur looking to scale or you're analyzing market trends, this illustrates a deliberate two-pronged strategy. The government is creating a highly regulated, FBI-monitored procurement environment, but simultaneously offering massive carrots in the form of FY 2026 financial incentives.
They are trying to make the stringent cost of compliance feasible by making the capital needed to adapt incredibly accessible.
What's fascinating here is how all these elements, the removal of 24 items on a federal marketplace, the survival strategy of a flatware company in New York, the introduction of FBI tip lines, and the restructuring of SBA loans interlocked to reflect much larger macro trends.
Yeah, let's zoom out to that macro level. How does untangling a fraudulent sticker on a website fit into the broader trajectory of the U.S. economy?
Well, it demonstrates a permanent shift away from passive global supply chains. For decades, the dominant strategy was to find the absolute cheapest manufacturer anywhere in the world and just trust the shipping routes.
That era is over.
It really is. There are growing national security concerns over an over-reliance on foreign products, particularly in critical infrastructure and defense sectors. The overarching goal of these policies is to build a resilient, self-sustaining industrial base through transparency.
By forcing strict adherence to domestic sourcing, the government is trying to cultivate an equitable landscape.
An ecosystem where the agencies complying with the Buy American Act actually receive genuine, quality products and the capital remains circulating within the domestic economy.
It is entirely about aligning federal spending with national economic security.
But it is a delicate balancing act. You pull one lever, cracking down on an assembly loophole, and suddenly you have the FBI scrutinizing ledgers, and you have to engineer entirely new loan structures to prevent the administrative burden from sinking the factories you want to save.
It reveals the complex machinery beneath everyday commerce.
It does, which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with as we wrap up this deep dive. We've explored the necessity of the crackdown and the financial safety nets provided, but consider the long-term trajectory.
Okay.
If proving your product is truly made in America evolves into an incredibly rigorous FBI-monitored process requiring flawless supply chain software and dedicated compliance officers, could we inadvertently engineer a two-tiered economy?
Oh, that's interesting.
A landscape where only massive, well-capitalized corporations can actually afford the administrative overhead to wear the American-made badge, while the smallest mom-and-pop shops, the exact craftsmen this policy was drafted to protect, ultimately get priced out of claiming their own national identity.
It is the ultimate unintended consequence the policymakers will have to navigate. A label is only meaningful if the system allows genuine producers to earn it without bankrupting themselves in the process.
It all comes back to the psychological weight of that simple sticker and the complex mechanisms deciding who gets to use it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep questioning the labels, keep looking deeper into the systems around you, and we will catch you next
A
time.
special thank you to MarketUS.com for furnishing us this information. You can reach them at MarketUS.com or call them at 954-636-3232. Before we go, this deep dive was created by the MarketUS.com team. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. It's right below the subscribe link.